Luocha has finally been released and the second part of 1.1 is live. Did we learn anything from Luocha's companion quest? Sadly, the answer is no. The only thing we learned is that Luocha is indeed suspicious, but nothing beyond that. Will the lack of information stop me from speculating? Of course not. So in this video, let's talk about some of the mysteries that surround Luocha. What's in his coffin? Where do his powers come from? And is he related to the Eon of Abundance, Yaoshi? Before we talk more about Luocha, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let me start this off by saying that we really don't know much about Luocha at this point, and many of the things I cover here will likely be subject to change when the story progresses. So if you're watching this much later when maybe 1.2 or 1.3 is released, just keep this in mind. We first meet Luocha through Dan Heng when he was trying to catch up with the rest of the Nameless in the Xianzhou Luofu. Out of necessity, Luocha, Dan Heng, and Su Shang formed an alliance to defend themselves from the encroaching Mara-struck soldiers. When asked, Luocha himself claims to be an intergalactic merchant and only uses the name Luocha while on the Xianzhou ships, indicating he might go by a different name elsewhere. What's suspicious about him is the reason why he is on the Xianzhou Luofu, and the first point of discussion, that coffin he's carrying. According to Luocha, he is currently there to fulfill a commission related to the coffin he carries, but the details are currently not made clear to us. While the law itself doesn't go into further detail here, there are two instances in which we see him interact with the coffin itself. The first is in his ultimate animation, where the coffin literally opens to release a mass of vine-like growths that embed themselves in his enemies, dealing damage and calling forth an illusion of the coffin itself. My interpretation of this is that these vines are seemingly vampiric or parasitic in nature, and once they embed themselves in a living being, they can drain from them their life force or energy and pulls them directly into the coffin. Mechanically, the ultimate also removes buffs that the enemies have, which further lends to this idea. The second instance we see Luocha interacting with the coffin is in the art of his 5-star light cone, the Echoes of the Coffin. In the light cone description, Luocha knocks on the coffin while talking to it. While he does not receive a vocal response, the same branches and vines are said to come out of the coffin and even pierce his hand, indicating it is aware of Luocha to some degree. So what exactly is in this coffin, as all we see in both instances is just a mass of branches and vines coming out of it? My first guess is that the coffin houses an individual who has undergone the Mara-stricken process to an extremely advanced degree and has largely become a mass of vegetation. The Mara-stricken affliction isn't a disease in the traditional sense as described by Dahao, but instead a condition, or as some see it, a curse that befalls all those with long lives. Jingyuan mentioned that a long time ago, Yaoshi gifted the people of the Xianzhou Luofu a tree whose fruits granted them immortality. These immortals though would eventually fall under a condition where they would continuously mutate and eventually lose their human forms, which the denizens referred to as Mara. Most Mara-struck individuals tend to experience a physical change where branches and tree-like features forcibly appear on their body and even merge with their skin. It's likely that the longer this continues, the more tree-like in appearance the individual becomes, almost as though the fruit they ate long ago has become a plant, growing in them and is now slowly taking over. This is what I'm guessing is in the coffin Luocha carries. An individual who has gone through this process in a far more advanced state, existing now only as a tree or a bush or something and made up entirely of these vines. As to who this person is, it might be a bit difficult to guess at this point, but based on Luocha's description, it may be someone he once allied with, as he mentioned that both of them looked to gain from the other but ended up underestimating the situation overall. Another guess is that it's a smaller mini version of the ambrosial arbor tree that sits within the Xianzhou Luofu, perhaps even a sapling. Now, this idea is a bit more difficult to verify as we know very little about what the tree actually is. But since the ambrosial arbor was a tree that Yaoshi herself gifted to the denizens of the Xianzhou Alliance, it would make sense that across the universe, more could be found elsewhere. Why and how Luocha would have something like this is completely beyond me, but my assumptions here are purely based on the fact that the contents of the coffin are vegetative in nature. It's also interesting to me that Luocha has shown the ability to heal others, indicating that he has a connection to the path of abundance and perhaps Yaoshi. Even his healing is a bit weird, as it's described to function differently from traditional medicine, allowing him to heal even an android or puppet, Shui. Both of these, at least to me, points at the possibility of Luocha being affiliated with the Eon of Abundance, given how the Ambrosial Arbor was a gift produced by the Eon itself, and Luocha perhaps having a mini version of it, as well as abilities that go beyond medical knowledge. Now, being just a healer doesn't necessarily mean that he is affiliated with Yaoshi herself. There are many healers like Natasha or Bailu who do not actively ally themselves with Yaoshi but is on the path of abundance. What sets Luocha aside from those characters is funnily the rating gun. Now, I know how theory-riddled this video is already becoming, but just hear me out. In another video, I talked about how some characters are speculated to be emanators due to them receiving an invalid rating from the rating gun curio. Yes, I am aware that Bailu does not receive one as well, but for these characters, namely Jingyuan, Sampo, March, and now Luocha, the gun explicitly mentions that they have an invalid rating, while Bailu doesn't get this text at all. In addition, Jingyuan is mentioned to receive the blessing of Lan, and Sampo and March both have some rather interesting possibilities that indicate they may also be emanators. Again, go watch that video if you want more detail and context, but with Luocha also now receiving an invalid rating, I suspect that he may be an emanator of abundance, or at the very least can pull more power from the path of abundance than people normally can. It's also possible that whoever is in the coffin is actually the one affiliated with Yaoshi, and Luocha gains power through them instead of by himself. Now, does this mean that Luocha is the bad guy, given how Yaoshi is set up to be the antagonist in the current storyline? Not necessarily. Remember that the Eons can give their powers to whoever they choose, whether they want to or not, like what Aha did to that one worm. So it could be that Luocha has received the powers from Yaoshi despite him not wanting them, and why he can heal practically anything, even an android. With all this being said, as I mentioned at the start, we really don't have much information on Luocha and the story currently unfolding in the Xianzhou Luofu. When the story continues in, I guess, 1.2, more details regarding this character will be revealed, and a lot of these guesses will need to be revisited. With the companion quest being released alongside his banner, the only thing we can glean from that story is that Luocha seems uninterested with whatever is currently happening. After the resurrection of the Ambrosial Arbor, he mentions that their journey, I assume talking to the Coffin, has only just begun while overlooking the tree itself. So I'm guessing that while he isn't interested in whatever is happening with the Stellaron, he might still have something to do with the tree itself. Welt also does have his suspicion due to Luocha's appearance and Welt's own past, but Star Rail's story could go an entirely different route, so we'll just have to wait and see whether any of these ideas turn out to be true or not. Let me know in the comments what you think Luocha is up to, and I'll end the video here. If you found it entertaining, then do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.